mess things up. All right, so hopefully that's streaming on YouTube correctly. My name is Ryan Hoger. I'll be your tour guide today. Also with me, as usual, is Dave Herman in our tech support group. I want to give you guys some updates on Infinity and Evolution controls, but this is more interactive or as interactive as you want it to be. So ask any questions you want. You can type them in the chat box. You can ask us to unmute you if you got a more detailed question you want to ask. But let us know what you want to know, and we'll try to answer it. But we do have a few things prepared here for like, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. Just make sure Infinity and Evolution controls. We got to mute that. But this is more interactive. All right. The live stream is now feeding on my computer, which is weird. All right. So we'll get started. Ask any questions as they come up. So from a perspective of evolution and infinity controls, we've had them for 20 years now, if you can believe that. We're going to focus on stuff that's a little more current. Basically, every 6-7 years, the thing gets completely overhauled. So a lot of you probably remember the old white vertical stats from 20 years ago. Those got replaced in 2011 with touchscreen versions of them. Those touchscreen versions are both the original version and the Series A. So that means is at the end of the part number, Carrier or Bryant appends a -A at the end, and then eventually a B and a -C, and so on down the line. That's how they, kind of identify. That's how they usually identify them over time. As far as software goes, we'll talk about in a little bit. Both the original touchscreen and the Series A touchscreen both operate on the Series A software. 2018 came out with the B version, which is what most of you are used to seeing. And eventually at one point, a white version came out in addition to the original black version. So that Series B version is 2018 until about 2 months ago, and they discontinued that. They ran, whoever makes the parts for them no longer makes the parts, essentially. That's kind of what happens in the electronics world. 6 years is a very long time. So they can no longer get some of the components they need to build them, so they stop building them. However, there is obviously now a Series C to replace that. On the Bryant side of the equation, everything I just said holds true, except for one caveat. On the Bryant side, there was this weird model that squeezed itself in 2010 that we didn't have on the Carrier side. It's basically the same as the old vertical white model, but it had a color screen. Very exciting, I know. But other than that, everything we're going to talk about today with the touchscreens applies equally between Carrier and Bryant stuff. So in regards to the C version, which is what will be new for most of you, it's new for you guys because at TEC we chose not to inventory it. So you probably have never seen one until recently. But it's been out for a little over 2 years. I want to say like April 2022. So it's a 2-year-old product, but it was being built simultaneously with the B version. The C version, in my opinion, at least 2 years ago, was inferior to the B. So we did not stock it. We chose not to inventory it. And this is, I'm showing you a screenshot of here, what came out in the bulletin when they released the C version. And yeah, it has a nicer screen, like a nicer touch screen, kind of like cell phones. Over time, the screen gets better and better, right? So it's a nicer touch screen. It's got a better Wi-Fi chip, right? That kind of thing. But on the negative side, it did not allow you to do updates with a USB or a micro SD card. So the only way to update it was via the internet, which is kind of a bummer. It didn't support remote room temperature sensors, which granted are not that common on non-zone systems, but nonetheless didn't support that. And then as you can see in the bottom left picture, that's my house. I've had this stat for almost 3 years when I was beta testing it, and I still have it on the wall. But you can see it did not fit on my vertical junction box. Whereas the B series and the A series before that fit on both a horizontal and a vertical junction box. These new C's only fit on a horizontal, not a vertical, which I found to be annoying. And it didn't work with the SAM module, which is very limited amount of people even know what that even is, let alone use it. But nonetheless, it didn't have that. So for those reasons, we just chose to kept using the B version because it was still available and was going to be continue to be available until now, finally, when they ran out of components. So most of you probably have never seen a C series from either Carrier or Bryant, even though it's been out for over 2 years. Recently, this summer, you probably have received some, and it's possible you received this one that I just described because there was a small window where these were being utilized until the new Cs became available. So there's, like 100 of those went out in our market or something like that, a small note. But the new C is what is available now. You might be able to find a B at one of our locations here and there, But in general, everything we're inventorying is these new ones. So the differences between the old C, which I know sounds stupid saying old from like 2 years ago, the old C and the new C, the part number is exactly the same, which kind of sucks. I like it when part numbers change, and I know how old things are based on the part number, but it's exactly the same. So if you want to know if you have an old or new one, you have to look at the serial number. And as I noted up on the top up here, it's the 5th digit of the serial number. If it has a W in it, it's the new one. If it has an M, it's the old one, right? So the W1, things that are been improved on the W1, it's mainly one thing that's improved, and it's the fact that you can update the software in the field now instead of waiting for an over-the-air internet update. That's being done with a USB-C drive, as I'm showing up in the upper right-hand corner. So instead of micro SD, we're back to USB, although we're not on the same kind of USB we were at on the really old A-series stats, mainly because most computers don't have an old USB. The one I'm working on does. I got 2 USB-Cs and 1 old USB, but the other 5 people that live in my house, I'm the only one that has a USB. Everybody else has USB-C on their Chromebooks and their laptops and whatnot. So that's kind of probably why they went down that route. So on the bottom, instead of having a micro SD slot, on the side, it has a USB-C slot. It is going to work exactly the same, and I'll show you the few things that are a little bit different. But you're going to use it to do software updates. If you don't want to wait for over-the-air updates, you can use it for loading dealer contact info, like a logo and stuff like that, if you want to. And then the consumer can use it for uploading screensaver photos. But generally, I tell the guys not to even mention that to the homeowner, because then you end up being the photo editing guy for them, which kind of stinks. The stat physically is the exact same dimension, so you still have the problem with it not fitting on a vertical junction box, although there is supposed to be a trim plate that's going to be available for that to solve that problem, kind of like they've done with Ecobee stats over time here. And it does work with the SAM modules now if you happen to be someone who's utilizing that. So there are some improvements. We are stocking this one now, partially because they made the improvements to fix the things we didn't like, but in reality, it's because they stopped making the B one. Otherwise, we'd probably just keep using the B. The one thing you do need to watch out for is there's still no ability for remote room temperature sensors on there. You have to put the stat in the occupied space, and you cannot have a remote temperature sensor. Zoning is different. Obviously, there's a bunch of remote sensors for zoning, but for a non-zone system, which is the everyday stuff, no remote sensors for this new stat. In regards to software updates, just like the B series, the C series will do automatic software updates. And in the past several years, both versions of those, it's not as painful as it used to be, where you say, yes, I want to do the update, and then it goes and downloads it. It does it more like your cell phone does now, where it downloads it in advance and it kind of just buffers it there, and then it asks you what you want to do. So in this case right here, in the upper right, let me see if I can get the little laser thing. Upper right, there's a little download. I caught it this morning, actually, while it was actually doing a download at my house. Can't tell, I'm at my house today. So I caught it actually doing it. So I was like, all right, time to take a picture. I've been waiting for that to happen. So you get that little arrow where it shows you just downloading. If you actually click on that, it'll show you how much is downloading. If you don't notice it and you don't click on it, it'll just download it in the background and it'll be fully ready to go, and it's just sitting there. Once it is downloaded, it'll look like it's always looked, which means it'll say in the, the alert section, it'll say, hey, reminder, software update available. And when you click on that, it'll say, hey, you're on version whatever, in this case, 3.46 of an A series going to 9. These bottom 2 screenshots were not from today. They're ones I already had here. But it'll tell you that what it is, and then you say, yes, you want to do it. If you don't want to wait for the automatic software updates, you may want to do your own update. You may also want to figure out what the heck version you're even on, or your customer's on, before you even sweat any of this. So if you go to the service settings on the stat, and the consumer can do this too. They can go to the general service hat, not the part where you hold it down and all that, just where you touch it. And then you can look at any of the model and serial numbers of any of your connected equipment. And in this case, we'll click System Control, and it'll pop up a screen that says System Control. And this happened to be a C version that somebody took a screenshot of. I don't know, a year or two ago. It was version 1.11. You could see it has an M in the serial number, so we know it's the old one, plus it's an old screenshot, obviously. Anything that's on the new one will have a W in this digit, and the oldest software that the new Cs could possibly have would be 1.5, 1.50. So this is definitely an old one. If you want to do the manual software updates, you need to download the software onto a computer temporarily in order to get it onto a USB, micro SD, or USB-C stick, depending on what version of software you're going to do. The process is the same, irregardless of what kind of touchscreen stat you have. However old it is, from 2011 forward, it's all the same process. So you can go to HVAC Partners to get that, but most of us know HVAC Partners is a little cumbersome to navigate. So I don't usually do that. I go to the consumer websites, which are shown on my screen here, myevolutionconnects.bryant, myinfinitytouch.carrier. It pops up a screen like I'm showing you right here. You do not have to log in, and you're just going to go down to the bottom and click on downloads. And then on there, there'll be a whole page of information. At the very top of it's going to be the downloads for software. And you can see I could click on Series A, Series B, or Series C software to download the updates. And it'll also give me release notes, at least on more current ones, to tell me what has changed exactly since the last software version that I might be utilizing. So when you read those release notes, there's like, I don't even know anymore. Well, I guess I could pull it up here. But there's a lot of pages on these things. This one has, 22 pages at this point for a version B stat, and a version C stat already has 13 pages of notes on there telling you what's going on, right? So it tells you what version you're on. It tells you what software it specifically can be utilized with, oops, what the heck did I do? Which stats I can utilize it with. I hit zoom instead of laser pointer. And then it'll tell you what the file name is going to be. In this case, binf0456.hex, which means nothing to URI, but later on you'll see where that does come into play. And then as you scroll down, it would tell you, hey, this is why there's a software update. Here's all of the things that were identified and fixed and updated. It could be a fix or an update, right? They found a bug and fixed it, or maybe there's some new models of product added or a new feature added. Like on here, it says there's a new ERV compatibility, right? So it could be things that are just new, or it could be things that are fixes to existing stuff. But it'll tell you what all that stuff is. And then if I was to scroll below this, where it's version 4.56, it would have told me what happened in version 4.47, which is the last one released prior to that. And I can scroll all the way back down to the beginning, which is why there's 22 pages instead of 2 pages on there. Version C stuff works the same way. The current version is 1.5. Anything with a USB-C connection on the side will also be 1.5 automatically. And you'll notice now, instead of the file number being binf and then version 4.56, 4.56.hex, now it's CINF, C-I-N-F, because it's version C instead of version B, version 1.50.bex. So the name of the file is kind of telling you what stat it goes with. C version of Infinity Stat, version 1.5 software, and then this is the file type that everything on your computer has. And then it'll also tell you what all the recent updates were. So when they did the update in April, and I believe the last time it was updated in November for the version C, when they went from November to April, these are all the things that they changed or tweaked since then. And if I was to scroll down, I'd see what they did in November and so forth down the line. Looks like we might have got a question. Tom says, I have a C version with a W in the 5th spot. I cannot download dealer logo, no prompt for uploading, just manual entry. That may or may not be true, Tom. I don't have a C version W yet. I only have M. We just started getting those W ones. I don't personally have access to one yet. I mean, I could go get one out of inventory. I just haven't done that. So laziness on my part, I guess. I'm told everything works exactly the same, but obviously based on your experience, Tom, it does not work exactly the same. I don't know if you're getting a specific error when you try to download it, or it's just the fact that the spot you would do it at just doesn't exist. So I'll have to continue researching that particular issue. So whether you're using the old USB for Series A, whether you're using micro SD card for Series B, or whether you're using USB-C for Series C stats, the process would work the same. The software needs to be put on those 3 devices, or one of those 3 devices, in a folder called T-stat. It has to be exactly T-stat. You can't put the word thermostat. You can't make up your own name. It has to be T-stat. Because when that thumb drive gets inserted into the stat, it goes and looks for a folder called T-stat to find the files that it wants. So this is just a screenshot of one of my drives. Tstat is where my software goes. Dealer is where your dealer logo and contact information could be uploaded in, which is what Tom was asking about a second ago. And then user would be where consumer photographs could go. The other ones that happen to be on my thumb drive have nothing to do with any of this discussion, nothing to do with loading anything on the thermostat, but I can have multiple files on there and it's fine. As long as I don't use all my space up, right? It's fine. And the stat doesn't care. So I got tstat highlighted here. When I click on tstat, in this case, I have put one of each of the three types in here. So this is what the file type looks like for a B series stat. B infinity. And by the way, if you're using Bryant, it would still say INF. It doesn't matter. It's the same software. Sorry to burst your bubble if you didn't know Bryant and Carrier were the same thing. It'll say B version infinity, software version 04.56, and then there's a hex type file. If I'm on the new C version, it'll be C INF, and in this case, version 1.50, and it's a BEX file. And this one's from my old Series A Infinity Stats, version 14.02 was the last version of software that ever came out for that stat. So I just keep it on there just because. And it's fine if they're all in the same folder, by the way, because the stat's only going to go look for the one that's the correct one. So when if I put all these files onto a USB-C and I stick it into the new C series stat, it's going to ignore everything on here except for the file that starts with CINF. It's the only one that it cares about. That's how the file structure would look. Looks like we got a question from Ryan. Said there's an issue connecting to the Wi-Fi app. Last three Evolution stats have had this issue. I don't have any details on that. I'm aware of what you're talking about because it came up was it like 2 weeks ago, Dave? Dave might be muted. I feel like it came up 2 weeks ago.
It's we've come across it and we had some more complaints of it today. We're in contact with the factory, with the Infinity guys at the factory, and they don't have a reason. They bounced back and forth that it was on the B controllers, the new software. Then they said it was the old software. So we don't have any solid answers on what's causing that connectivity issue. And it's been pretty regular for a couple of weeks with people complaining about it and running into that problem.
We kind of feel it's more recently developed hardware because we have a bunch of Bs in all of our training labs. So we mess with them and we have old, and we put the 4.56 and the 4.47 software on them, and they work fine in our lab with either version of software. But it seems like newer stats, like newer pieces of hardware stats, irregardless of which version of software, seem to be the ones that are not connecting for some reason. But at our labs, it's been fine. At the existing ones at people's houses, it's been fine. It's just been new installs. So we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for the factory software people to tell Dave what they find when they can replicate it here.
Yeah, we've gone as far as to testing some of them in the lab right off the shelf. Ryan and I did with B controllers and our B controls, and we were having the same issue with the new ones, even though, like you said, our lab ones are staying connected and we're not having problems with those.
Yeah, so therefore we know it's not our Wi-Fi. We know it's not the version of the software on the stat, so it's got to be the stat at that point.
Yeah, and we've tried on both versions of software also, the current one on the B control and then the previous also. So we don't have any good answers, and the factory has yet to get us any good answers, and we've been in contact with them pretty regularly for the last week plus.
Other stuff you guys want to ask before you mention a few other items on here in terms of things that are different lately? Feel free to ask them. We're interested in your comments. I do want to mention two things that showed up like a year ago, I want to say, but most of you probably haven't seen or configured in the field. But later on, when you get an alert for it, then you're like, what the heck is this thing? This is on B and C series stats. In the reminder section, which the consumer can access, instead of just going to reminders where they can pick like their filter, dirty reminder, and their humidifier pad and that stuff, there's also a newer one called alerts. When you click on that, you'll get high temp, low temp, high humidity, low humidity. And you can go into each one of those and set it for whatever you want as the consumer. So in this case, someone said, hey, if it's above 95 degrees, tell me. If it's above 80% humidity, tell me, right? That kind of thing. Me personally, at my own house and even our own buildings at TEC with Ecobee stats, I set it for 5 degrees more than my away set point. So if my away set point is 80 degrees for cooling, I set the high alert at 85, figuring if it broke long enough for me to get 5 degrees out of set point, something's probably wrong. And then the same thing on the low side. I'll set it for 5 degrees lower than our lowest heating set point in that case. Humidity, I usually set it for 70% on the high side. And as you probably heard me bitch about before, the more oversized your equipment is, the harder it's going to be for you to keep things down at the 50, 60% range. And then the low humidity, if it's a home, it's one thing. In our buildings, we don't have humidifiers for commercial buildings, so it doesn't really matter. But for a house, I probably would set it at 10%. I wouldn't go higher because when you put the window reset stuff on, if it's really cold out, it's going to be lower than that. In any case, if those things get triggered, it'll show up as a fault alert on the front of the stat and get emailed to the consumer and or the dealer if all that is set up, obviously. And this is what those alerts will look like: 187, 188, 189. And then for whatever reason, 191 instead of 190. I have no idea what happened to 190, but apparently that wasn't a good number. But that's what those alerts are telling you. So either something's broken and it's not running heating and cooling correctly, or someone put an alert setting in there that's just not realistic, right? They said, oh, well, alert me if it's above 70 degrees. And it's like, well, yeah, it's going to be above 70 degrees sometimes. So that's a stupid alert point. So when you get those alerts, those messages reported from the consumer back to you, that's the place you want to check. What do they put in these? What did they or your technician put in these particular screens? All right, while we're on here, let's see. We got a question from Jim. I've had some luck dumbing down the software version from 4.46 to 4.47 to get it to connect to the data and the over-the-air servers. We've not had that same luck on the few that we've tested, but like you said, it could just be luck that maybe the reason, without knowing the reason why it's not connecting, it's hard to know what the solution is, right? But you're right, it's probably worth a try. The only bad thing is version 4.47 struggles to work correctly with module and gas furnaces. So you want 4.56 for that. And if I got to pick the choice of it, finding my furnace and connecting and starting up versus, getting on Wi-Fi, I'll hold off on the Wi-Fi until the solution is available on that. But thanks for the input, Jim. Let me click. There you go. There is another fault code thing that had showed up around a similar, and I apologize for this screenshot, and I realize it's in Celsius too, none of which is exciting to you. But it came out around the same time as these high alerts, and it is a little bit different than the 187, 188 type alerts. This one's fault code 140, and it can go 141 through 148 if you have a zoned system. So 140 is what most of you would see on a project. But if you happen to have a zone system, then there would be no 140. And instead it'd be 141 through 148 to tell you which specific zone of your possible 8 zones is the one that's experiencing the issue. So there's lots of reasons why that could occur, but it's much more common, at least in my opinion, and Dave might say different, but it's much more common that people ask about this on the zoning systems. And it pretty much means your zone's over or under conditioning. And it happens a lot in the zoning systems because people put really large equipment in and they got one little zone calling for heating or cooling by itself, all by its lonesome. So the system starts bleeding air into other zones to try to solve the pressure control problem by not being able to modulate down for one little tiny zone. And then what ends up happening is some zones get close to being overheated or overcooled, and then it doesn't take much from there to actually overheat or overcool. So you'll see it more on zoning systems. It probably means your equipment's like double the size that it needs to be. Other things that might cause it would be like if you have 2 zones feeding the same room, which is not ideal in any way, but sometimes it happens because you're just trying to make ductwork be reused and it is what it is. Or you got a big open room that happens to have 2 thermostats that feed something in there, right? And one of those thermostats is overcooling the other because somebody said, on the left side of this room, I want to keep it 72, and on the right side, I want to keep it 69. It's like, well, now these 2 things might be overlapping each other, and since they're in the same room, that would be a problem. So keep those in mind if they come up. And then if it gets really hot in there, like 90 degrees or really cold below 50, then it'll just shut everything down instead of just that one zone. But that's probably a different type of problem in that case. And And these screenshots or these notes really were just kind of explaining what I just said there. What other questions do we have? Did we have one after Jim's here? Let me get off that screen. Dave, I had a system that would connect to Wi-Fi. Carrier tech support recommended a TP-Link wireless N router, and it finally got connected. Was that recently, Dave, in the past 3 or 4 weeks on a B series stat? Just out of curiosity. This was not you, Dave Herman. This was Dave.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if he's referring to one that the TP-Link router solved, a while back, because
I
that
mean,
has been an issue.
I know some of the guys have recommended that from the department, from tech support, like in recent times when you
Yeah.
were having a lot of problems. But yeah, personally, me, I don't know of any that I've told in recent history.
All right, more questions? There's one other thing I wanted to show everybody, and obviously more questions are welcome. Okay, Dave Selke did come back and say, yes, that TP-Link router did solve a recent B series issue. So I guess that could be worth trying. I tried hotspotting a couple of them on a phone too temporarily, and it didn't solve it either. But the other thing I want to show you guys, I made a quick little crude video today, just to show you what I'm calling effing magic. I didn't know about this until maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. When I was beta testing something from Infinity Evolution standpoint, and somebody at the factory is like, "Well, do a boot reset," and I'm like, "I don't know what that means, dude. Like, just like reset everything, you know." I'm like, "Back to factory default." I'm like, no, not the factory default. Just reset the boot software. Like, once again, I don't know what you're saying. And they're like, just reset everything. I'm like, you mean cycle power to it? Like, no, not cycle power. That's different. I'm like, okay, why don't you tell me what you mean? So this little video is like 18 seconds long. So what you do on the main screen like this is you hold your finger down on the blank spot of the screen for about 10 seconds, and the stat will reboot. And up in the left corner, you'll see it say bootloader, which should happen any second now. Right, bootloader version, I think it was 0.0.9.0. And that resets the firmware in the hardware of this stat. But if you cycle power the stat, it does not do this for whatever reason. I don't know what this actually is supposed to even do. I kind of equate it to like clearing the cache on your browser. Like anytime you have a problem, like getting something to load on a website, the IT guy is always like, yeah, clear your cache out. And you're like, what does that do? I'm like, I don't know, it just wipes a bunch of stuff out and gets you a fresh start, bro. You're like, all right, I'll try it, right? And then 50% of the time it works, and you don't know why, and they don't know why, and it's kind of that. This is that scenario. Half the time it solves whatever your weird problem is. Like if you couldn't connect to Wi-Fi or whatever, sometimes this just a nice reset of it and everything magically works. Haven't been lucky enough for that to happen with this particular Wi-Fi connectivity issue, but in other cases I have used this. I probably have temporarily, magically fixed 100 stats this way, not knowing what the heck was happening to them. I wouldn't do it right away. I try to figure out what's actually happening first, because most things that are going on are real problems. But if you've exhausted all other options and you're like, you know what, I just want my mulligan, this is the mulligan. Hold it down on the main part of the screen. You have to do it when it's on that like home screen, not when it's on the screen with the set points and all of that. So if you're on the set point screen, you got to hit the back button to get back to the home screen where it just basically shows you like your weather and that kind of stuff, right? The screen where there's no set point buttons or anything on here, no mode, right? So you just hold that screen down. It's about 10 seconds or so. And then it reboots back up in under a minute and goes back to operating again. And every time I've done it, at least even if I've done it like in my house and stuff, like when I made this video, my furnace keeps operating the whole time. It doesn't stop. It just keeps operating, but the stat reboots itself. What kind of other questions you guys have for us? Anything related to evolution or infinity that we can try to answer? Application questions, issues you've been struggling with on projects. Our new free thermostat program. No, we don't have that. I'm just kidding.
On the budget.
I'm going to give it like another minute or two for anybody that wants to put a question up. We'll see what happens. All right, Dave says he also has an older B control that locks up and goes black. You would have to reset power to get it to work. It happened even when I updated it off the drive. All right, so I don't know what that would be. That would be definitely one that I would try the effing magic on. Now, if it keeps happening, then that's not a permanent solution, obviously. But it'd be worth trying once to see if that resets the stat and everything magically works again. You'd obviously have to do it when it was powered, though. So you have to do your reset trick to get it to come back online. Then do this effing magic trick where you hold your finger on it, and then see if it comes back ever again. It's weird that it's locking up, though. Tom asked, do we have back plates for C versions? I don't know if those came in yet. They exist.
I did not, last time I inquired, which was the end of last week, we did not have them.
Okay. And that's
So
the answer
I
on that.
can't speak for this week, but I'm guessing it's probably a no, considering that was, I believe, possibly Friday, maybe Thursday.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a back plate that basically covers the hole, and then you mount the stat to the back plate, kind of like we do with the Ecobee stuff. It's a good question, Tom.
And there wasn't an expected time when I asked. I was told they didn't know.
Let's see if there's a part number on the.
Or I guess it sounds better if we say any day now.
There's a reason why you and I are not involved in sales. They didn't announce a part number for it, but somebody probably knows. Anybody else have any other questions they would like to?
And we could check on that dealer logo thing for Tom.
Yeah, I'll have to just try one. I'll be there in the lab tomorrow. Maybe we'll just try one. I know you took one out of inventory the other day, so we'll play with it. Okay, let me see. Is there any other questions? Question box. Oh, there it is. James, had a weird one today with different Wi-Fi connection where it would connect and disconnect from the router every minute or two and never connect to the data or OTA servers. Tried the magic, updated software versions, restarted router, cleared the cache, same issue. Tried swapping the stat with a new one to get the same problem. Might have something to do with the firewall preventing it from connecting. Yeah, I guess at this point, the best thing to do would be to take it somewhere where you know your other ones work. Like if you have one at home or in the shop where you have things connecting just fine, and see if you can get it connected to that router. It sounds like your problem is different than the one other people have been experiencing just recently, which is where it won't connect to the server. Yours isn't even staying connected to the Wi-Fi router. So that Wi-Fi router is booting you for some reason. Maybe it's the Wi-Fi router. It could be the stat, but the fact that you tried two makes it less likely. Could be the proximity of the stat to the router. Maybe it's in a spot that's kind of a dead zone. I know like at my house, my daughter's bedroom, like one half per bedroom, she can't get Wi-Fi. And I'm just like, well, deal with it. Sit on the other half of the bedroom. That's hard with a thermostat though. But maybe having a second router in a different spot could solve that. But I would take the stat, especially since you have two of them now, the one that was originally there and the one that you retested. I would take them to somewhere you know things work, or take it to our lab where we have other stats connected. And let's see if we can get it to connect and stay on that router. And then we'll know for sure if it's the stat or the local router at that person's house. Any other questions while we're on here? I know we've been doing these pretty much every month for like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months. Going forward, we're probably not going to do that. We're probably going to do them less or more frequently, depending on as topics come up. Because there's been a couple times like, oh, I wish we could do two this month. There's been other times like we don't have anything that's been, coming up a lot this month, so we want to skip it. So instead of having it just always be something happening, we'll just send out a notice to you guys, not the day of like I did today, right? I knew you already had it on your calendars, but we'll send it out like 2 weeks before saying, hey, we're going to have this topic on this day, but it'll still be the same kind of thing, like 20, 30 minutes with a Q&A thing. That way it doesn't take up your whole day. So if there's other stuff that you guys want us to do in the future, let us know and we'll plan for those. Other than that, if there's no other pending questions, we'll log off here. I'll leave it open for like another minute in case somebody asks something else. All right, I guess we'll shut it down then. Thank you guys for your time and
Hey, thanks, everyone.
attend.